Hello, my love. Welcome back. In today's episode, we are talking boundaries. And boundaries not in the broad sense, because honestly, you could have an entire podcast, and I'm sure there is entire podcasts with thousands of episodes dedicated to just the general sense of boundaries. But what I want to talk about is boundaries in business, and more specifically, boundaries around your cycle. This is because when you're living in alignment with your cycle and running your business in alignment with your cycle, you're really challenging and pushing against the societal norms and the ways that we are expected to run business and expected to show up in life. And this can come with some backlash and pushback from people who expect us to show up the way that they want us to, rather than the way that we know we need to for our bodies and for our businesses. This can be clients, it can be friends, it can be families, it can be our bosses if you have a boss as well, and maybe even employees of yours. Regardless of who you need to set boundaries for, ultimately, they are for you and for them, for their benefit. So sometimes we think of boundaries as something that is selfish, but I always think of boundaries as you're giving the gift of your time to someone. And if you're giving that gift when you're burnt out or when you're resentful of them using your time, it's like giving someone a gift that's actually one of your favorite things that you own, and you give it to them and you're like, here you go, but I hate you for taking this thing from me, and I'm gonna miss this thing and I wish I could keep it. Like, being on the receiving end of that doesn't feel good, and being the person giving that gift doesn't feel good. So we want to get to a point where we're realizing that boundaries are not just for us to protect ourselves or against other people to stop them from taking so much from us, but it's a beautiful exchange, and it's for the good of everyone involved. So boundaries in relation to business and cyclical business. One of the main things I preach, and if you're following me for a while, you would have heard me say this over and over and over again. When you're on your period, your body is literally designed to rest. And what I say to my cyclical business clients is your only job for your business, for yourself, while you're on your period, is to rest. This is when we shift out of doing into being. It's like that moment in between the inhale and exhale. Nothing's happening, but it's purposeful, right? Otherwise, we'd be hyperventilating. If there was no pause in and out, we'd get freaking lightheaded all of the time, and we'd feel dizzy and flustered. That pause in between the inhale and exhale is brief, just as is your period. It's 4 days, maybe 4 to 7 days in your entire month that you just need to take a step back, a brief pause that allows the inhale and the exhale to happen with ease, right? Sometimes, though, we may come up against people that don't understand the necessity of that, and that's okay for them, but that doesn't mean you have to conform to the expectation to push through for anyone else's sake. So that requires some boundary setting. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode, is how to do that, how to navigate that, and how I personally do this and how I help my clients do this so that you can move forward in your cyclical business journey with very clear and concrete boundaries that are built with love and for love and with intention, so that you can live your best life and have your most successful and easeful business. So in terms of setting boundaries for your clients when you're on your period, if you are a coach or a service-based business and you have clients that receive access to you throughout the month or throughout the week, you may be feeling like, well, how am I supposed to take 4 days off and not be there for my clients? I completely understand that. Foreign concept for me too. But what I have found is by being completely open and honest with your clients and saying, hey, this is the level of access you have to me. Same thing as time. You would set a time boundary of, I will answer your message within this amount of time, and at this time I log off, and at this time I'm back on. So you set your business hours. That's a boundary, right? We're all pretty, I would assume, familiar with that, saying I'll get back to you within 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours, and within business hours, which is between this time and this time. You can, while you're laying out those boundaries, which I would say most people are confident and comfortable with, because that's kind of how the world exists anyway. Like, you can't show up to Kmart at 10 p.m. and be like, well, I want to buy something, so you should just be open, right? We live in a world where we kind of understand, hopefully, the time boundaries of business time and how long it takes to respond and reply to things. When you're saying those, you can easily just say to your clients, also, I run my business in alignment with my cycle, and there will be 4 days of the month where I am taking a pause. It may take a little bit longer for me to respond to you than it would normally. I may not respond until my period has ended or my inner winter has ended. But trust that when I return from that pause, I will be able to show up for you and be able to serve you with even more potency and power than I would if I push through that phase. So just to know that, and you can let them know. You can say, in advance, or you could even just say like, hey, my period has just started, or my inner winter has just started. I'm going to be taking some time to pause. If you need me, here's where to contact me. Just be mindful that I might take a little bit longer. Simple as that, right? You are also then not responsible for how they react to your boundaries. You've set the boundary, that's that. If they're confused, you can clarify, but you are not obligated to explain or justify or bend your boundaries if that doesn't feel right for someone else. You are your own person. You are sovereign over your own time and your own energy, and only you can make that decision of how you're going to spend it. So that's one way of doing it with clients. When it comes to something in the more corporate or professional world, say, for example, you are a designer and you have a client and you have a brief and you need to get their certain product to them by a certain time, this is where scheduling with your cycle comes in handy, because you can know in advance when you're going to be needing to take that rest during your cycle, and you can plan ahead and plan around it. So this would look like making sure that you're either handing in the particular product before your period, or like making sure you're not needing to be contacted during that time of your cycle, right? So that's why planning and scheduling with your cycle is really, really helpful, because it also helps make these boundaries a little bit easier to enforce, because you're not actually having to decline events and invites and reschedule calls, because you know when you're going to be needing your rest, and you can tailor your time for that. But when it comes to corporate stuff, and they might not be as flexible, aside from planning with your cycle to make sure that you're not, for example, handing in something the day after your period ends, because then the final stretch of that job and the finishing touches are going to be needing to be made while you're on your period. And that's going to mean you're probably not going to be able to clock off, because the client's probably going to want to have the final checks, etc., etc. So with that, it's less about setting boundaries in the sense of, hey, taking time out, I'm not going to be available for 4 days, which you still can absolutely do. But it's more about having boundaries around your time in the beginning. When the client comes to you and says, hey, this is what I want from you, this is when I want it done, and you get to decide, okay, well, that's when they want to get it done, that's their timeline, amazing. How does that fit with my cycle? Where does that fit in, right? So that's the boundary. You could say, hey, I'm actually not going to be able to get it to you by that week. I could get it done this week or this date, etc., right? So it's having that conversation in the beginning. If it's something like a corporate project, or not even necessarily corporate, I don't know why I keep saying corporate, but something where it's less flexible than like a one-on-one coaching client where you can just have like a friendly conversation of like, just for 4 days out of our 6-month program, I'm going to be that out of 1 month of every month for our 6-month program, I'm going to be out of contact. When it's more of like we need something done by a deadline, you just need to have that conversation and that boundary setting in the beginning. Yeah, boundaries are really important in everyday life, and even with your partner, this might not, sound like it's relevant for business, but it definitely is. Everything is connected, right? So having good boundaries with your partner and your friends and around your social life, so that when you're on your period, you're also not just taking time away from business, but you're letting the people that you love and that are in your life know, hey, this is what I need at this time. So if I'm not coming to this particular, coffee catch up, or I need to, if I do come, just know I am going to be a bit soft and slow. It's as simple as having the conversation. You'll be surprised how understanding most people are when you bring it up. I remember being so fearful that people would think, oh my gosh, she's fucking crazy. She's like using her period as an excuse. But most people will understand. And also, like, if they judge you, do you want that kind of person in your life? Really? So I hope that's been helpful. There's also like so many other ways that you can go about setting boundaries, but the main takeaway I want you to walk away from this episode with is that you are deserving of rest. Your body, when you're on your period, is literally designed for rest. And rest is a right and not a reward. You don't have to earn your rest. You don't have to justify your rest. You are not a machine. And without rest, you will crumble. And no one is entitled to your time and energy without your say-so, right? And you get to decide when you are showing up and how you're showing up. And by letting the people that do usually have access to your time and energy know this is the conditions and this is when I'm going to be showing up and how I'm going to be showing up, you give them the permission slip to also do the same for themselves, and you give them the opportunity to love you and respect your time and energy in the way that you deserve. So I hope that's been helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions about boundary setting around your cycle. Again, like I said, this could be like hours and hours long and go into very deep detail, but I just wanted to touch on the basics and why it's important and how simple it can really be by just having a conversation and being honest with your clients, with your customers, with your friends, with your family, with your partner about your cycle needs as they change through the seasons, and more specifically around your inner winter and period, because that's, when you're usually needing a little bit of a more drastic shift in how you're going to be showing up and how much energy you have to give. So thank you so much. If you have any other questions, let me know. As always, inside the CEO Sisterhood, my free Facebook group, we dive into this sort of topic so much more depth and with weekly training. So if that's something you're interested in, link will be down below, and I hope to see you in the next episode.